Why do humans crave recognition and praise from others? Hello, dear listeners. Today, we are going to explore one of the fundamental questions of human existence. Why do humans desire recognition and praise from others? While this question seems simple, its answer is rooted in our biological nature, complex social structures, and deep psychological needs. The desire to be recognized by others is so universal that it sometimes seems like an inevitable part of our existence. However, when we explore this desire more deeply, we discover that it is not merely an expression of vanity or weakness, but a complex phenomenon deeply connected to our evolutionary history and psychological development. In this audiobook, based on the latest research and ancient wisdom, we will explore why humans crave recognition and praise from others, and how this desire affects our mental and social development. We will also share insights into how this desire can sometimes limit us and how we can handle it in a healthy way. Now, let's explore this fascinating aspect of human psychology together. Chapter 1: The biological basis of recognition and praise. The human brain is an amazing organ, and like many other behaviors, our tendency to seek recognition and praise from others is deeply related to the chemical processes of the brain. Dopamine, the chemical reward of recognition. When someone praises us, a neurotransmitter called dopamine is released in our brain. Dopamine is commonly known as the pleasure chemical, but in reality, it plays a more complex role. Dopamine plays a key role in our motivation, learning, and reward system. When we receive positive feedback from others, the release of dopamine provides a kind of reward to the brain, which makes us want to repeat that behavior. In this way, our brain has an internal mechanism that encourages socially valuable behavior. An interesting fact is that this dopamine response is also triggered by addictive drugs or activities like gambling. Yes, that thrill you feel when you get a like on Facebook follows a similar biological mechanism to what a gambler feels when they win. Scary fact, isn't it? This is why we get addicted to social media. Oxytocin, the hormone of social bonding. Praise and recognition are also related to the release of a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin, often called the love hormone or trust hormone, promotes social bonding and intimacy. According to research, positive social interactions raise oxytocin levels, which in turn create a virtuous cycle that encourages social behavior. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes a lot of sense. Since human survival has heavily depended on group cooperation, developing biological mechanisms that strengthen social bonds would have been beneficial for the survival of our species. But to add a slightly cynical perspective, these biological mechanisms can sometimes become a trap that makes us overly dependent on the opinions of others. The fact that our brain can create a chemical addiction to social approval explains why many people find their worth in external recognition. Cortisol, the pain of rejection. On the opposite side of seeking recognition from others is the fear of rejection. When we experience social rejection or criticism, a stress hormone called cortisol increases in our body. Interestingly, according to neuroscience research, the brain's response to social rejection activates similar areas as when experiencing physical pain. This means that experiencing social rejection triggers a neurological response similar to the body feeling actual physical pain. This explains why we fear rejection and criticism so much. It's not just emotional discomfort, but a biological response similar to actual pain. So we instinctively avoid it and instead seek recognition and praise. Here we discover an interesting paradox. Our brain is designed to make us conform to social norms through the desire for social recognition and fear of rejection. But at the same time, we also want to stand out as individuals through originality and self-expression. This tension shapes many aspects of human behavior. Chapter 2: The Desire for Recognition from an Evolutionary Perspective. Now let's travel back thousands of years to see why humans developed a tendency to crave recognition from others during the evolutionary process. Group survival and social approval. For prehistoric humans, belonging to a group was not a simple choice, but a matter of survival. A human alone was much more vulnerable to numerous dangers, such as predators, climate change, and food shortages. In this context, being recognized and approved by the group was not simply a fulfillment of the ego, but a survival strategy, because being rejected by the group was often tantamount to a death sentence. Let me give you an interesting example. Anthropologists have found evidence that in prehistoric communities, expulsion was one of the most severe punishments. That is, what was more feared than physical pain or loss of property was the severance of social bonds. This is powerful evidence that explains why we value social recognition and belonging so much. Social hierarchy and resource access. In early human societies, individuals with high social status had greater access to better food, shelter, and potential mates. Therefore, gaining social recognition and a respected position within the group led to direct survival and reproductive advantages. Think about it. Even in modern society, we can still see these patterns. Don't socially successful people tend to have access to more resources and opportunities? Of course, we are no longer hunter-gatherers, but our brains still retain much of that old programming. But if we think from a somewhat cynical perspective here, this evolutionary legacy sometimes appears in distorted forms in modern society. We have become obsessed with status symbols that are not absolutely necessary for survival, and sometimes we prioritize external recognition over our true happiness or worth. Cooperation and reciprocity. Another key aspect of human society is cooperation. By cooperating with others, we can achieve goals that would be impossible to achieve alone. In a cooperative society, it is important to be recognized as a trustworthy and contributing member. This increases other people's willingness to cooperate with you. Interestingly, the concept of reputation exists in almost all human societies studied by anthropologists. Reputation is essentially a collective assessment of your value and reliability within the group. People with good reputations get more opportunities for cooperation and, consequently, better opportunities for survival and reproduction. Our desire for recognition from others is not simply to satisfy our egos, but part of a deep evolutionary strategy to survive and thrive in a cooperative society. Chapter 3: Psychological Perspective, Formation of Self and Identity. Now let's enter our inner world and look at how recognition from others affects our self-concept and identity formation. Looking-glass self and social self. In 1902, sociologist Charles Cooley proposed the concept of the looking-glass self. According to this theory, our self-concept is greatly influenced by our perception of how others see us. Cooley explained this process in 3 stages. First, we imagine how others will see us. Second, we interpret how they will judge our appearance and behavior. Third, we develop feelings about ourselves based on these interpretations. From this perspective, our self is not purely an internal construct, but a product of social interaction. We see ourselves through the responses of others. It's quite a scary concept when you think about it. If our self-concept is so dependent on the responses of others, how autonomous are we as beings? An interesting question, isn't it? Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the need for recognition. In psychologist Abraham Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs, the esteem need is located just below self-actualization. Maslow divided this into 2 types. First, self-esteem, that is, confidence in one's abilities, independence and sense of achievement. And second, respect from others. That is, recognition, status, reputation, assessment of importance. According to Maslow, when these needs are not met, we feel inferiority, helplessness, and weakness. But if we think from a slightly cynical perspective here, there is criticism that Maslow's theory overly reflects Western individualistic values. Not all cultures may have the same hierarchy of needs. For example, in some collectivistic cultures, group harmony and contribution to the community may be more valued than individual recognition. Erikson's psychosocial development theory, developmental psychologist Erik Erikson proposed 8 stages of human development, each with a specific psychosocial crisis. In this theory, recognition from others plays an important role at several stages. 1. Infancy, ages 1 to 3. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Children gain confidence in their abilities or doubt them through the reactions of others, such as parents to their actions. 2. Early school age, ages 6 to 12. Industry versus inferiority. Children develop a sense of competence through recognition of their efforts and achievements. 3. Adolescence, ages 12 to 18. Identity versus role confusion. Adolescents value the recognition of peers and role models as they form their identity. Erikson's theory suggests that recognition from others is not just a desire, but an essential part of healthy psychological development. Here we discover a subtle aspect of the desire for recognition. Seeking recognition from others is not necessarily negative. It is also a natural part of our identity formation and psychological development. The problem arises when we become overly dependent on external recognition. Chapter 4. The socio-cultural context of the desire for recognition. While the desire for recognition and praise is universal, the way it is expressed and fulfilled varies greatly depending on culture and social context. Cultural differences, individualism versus collectivism. In Western individualistic cultures, recognition for individual achievement and independence is valued. Messages like achieve your dreams, be yourself, emphasize individual uniqueness and self-expression. In contrast, in collectivistic cultures such as East Asia, harmony, humility, and contribution to the group tend to be more highly valued. In these cultures, recognition is often related to the ability to meet group expectations, rather than individual uniqueness. These differences are also reflected in the way praise is given. According to research, Western parents often praise a child's inherent traits, saying, "You are so smart," while East Asian parents tend to emphasize effort and process, saying, "You studied hard." But to speak of the cynical part here, in any culture, we are socialized to fit a certain model of a good person, and if we deviate from it, we face various forms of disapproval. Despite cultural differences, the basic principle of using the desire for recognition as a mechanism of social control remains the same. Modern technology and the desire for recognition, the impact of social media. Entering the 21st century, social media has fundamentally changed the way we seek and receive recognition. Facebook's likes, Instagram's followers, Twitter's tweets, etc. provide immediate and quantified forms of recognition. These forms of digital recognition have very powerful psychological effects. According to research, dopamine is released when receiving positive feedback on social media, which can reinforce addictive behavior. We edit, optimize, and sometimes completely reconstruct our lives to get likes. What's really interesting is that social media both satisfies and reinforces our desire for recognition. We post more content, join more platforms, and spend more time online for more likes. From a slightly cynical perspective, Social media companies have had remarkable success in commodifying and monetizing the human desire for recognition. Their business model is fundamentally based on exploiting our psychological vulnerabilities. Quite an uncomfortable truth, isn't it? Recognition and power relations. Socially, patterns of recognition often reflect and reinforce existing power structures and inequalities. Sociologist Pierre Bourdieu explained this through the concept of symbolic capital. Symbolic capital exists in the form of reputation, honor, recognition, etc., and can be exchanged with other forms of capital, i.e., economic, cultural, and social capital. The important point is that the criteria for determining whose achievements are worthy of recognition and praise are often shaped by existing power structures. This helps explain why the contributions of certain groups are systematically undervalued or ignored. For example, the scientific, artistic, and intellectual contributions of women and minority groups have often been devalued by male-centered and Western-centered criteria. Patterns of recognition are not simply personal, but also political. Chapter 5. The psychological impact of excessive desire for recognition. While a healthy desire for recognition from others is natural and adaptive, when it becomes excessive, it can lead to various psychological problems. The relationship between self-esteem and external validation. Self-esteem is the overall subjective evaluation of oneself. Psychologists often distinguish between two types of self-esteem. First, conditional self-esteem. That is, self-esteem based on external achievements, recognition, or specific conditions. Second, unconditional self-esteem. That is, less dependent on external factors, based on intrinsic value. People who rely too much on the recognition of others often have conditional self-esteem. This means their sense of worth is primarily determined by external validation. The problem is that external validation is not always consistent or guaranteed. This makes their self-esteem unstable and overly sensitive to the opinions and judgments of others. Also, an interesting fact is that self-esteem based on external validation is often like an insatiable monster. The more achievements and recognition you get, the more you need. It's like a kind of psychological tolerance. Social anxiety and the desire for recognition. Social anxiety disorder is one of the most common mental health problems, characterized by a strong fear of being negatively evaluated by others. Socially anxious individuals often focus excessively on what others think and overestimate the possibility of negative evaluation. They tend to interpret small social mistakes as catastrophes, which leads to avoiding social situations. From a slightly cynical perspective, modern society often creates conditions that exacerbate social anxiety. With the rise of social media, we are constantly comparing ourselves to others, and the perception that every aspect of our lives can be publicly evaluated is reinforced. In a way, we are voluntarily exposing ourselves to a state of 24-hour observation and evaluation. Perfectionism and the pursuit of recognition. Perfectionism is another way of seeking recognition from others. Perfectionists often equate their worth with achievement, and their efforts are primarily focused on avoiding failure and gaining approval from others. Psychologists distinguish three types of perfectionism. First, self-oriented perfectionism, that is, setting high standards for oneself. Second, other-oriented perfectionism, that is, expecting unrealistic standards from others. Third, socially prescribed perfectionism, that is, believing that others expect perfection from you. Of these, especially the third type is most closely related to seeking recognition from others. Socially prescribed perfectionists believe they must meet others' high standards to be worthy and recognized. This form of perfectionism is often associated with depression, anxiety, burnout, and even suicidal ideation. And unfortunately, we often ask why whenever we hear about celebrities and politicians committing suicide, because it essentially sets a goal that is impossible to achieve. Perfection is like a horizon that can never be reached. To present a cynical perspective here, modern consumer society actively promotes these perfectionist tendencies, because people who feel they are not good enough tend to buy more products and services. The pressure to be perfect is one of the driving forces of the capitalist system. Quite an uncomfortable truth, isn't it? Recognition, addiction, and fear of rejection. In particularly severe cases, the desire for recognition from others can develop into a kind of addiction. Psychologists call this recognition addiction. Recognition addicts show the following characteristics. 1. Extreme fear of rejection and criticism. 2. Compulsive desire to please others. 3. Conforming to others' demands even at the sacrifice of one's own needs and desires. 4. Difficulty saying no. 5. Extreme attempts to avoid conflict, etc. These patterns often stem from conditional love in childhood. If you received love and recognition from parents or guardians only when you behaved in certain ways as a child, this can lead to patterns of over-reliance on the approval of others as an adult. An interesting fact is that this kind of addiction, like other addictions, can develop tolerance. That is, over time, more recognition is needed to get the same level of satisfaction. And when there is no recognition, you can experience a kind of withdrawal symptom. Thus, anxiety, depression, even panic attacks are possible. Chapter 6. Positive aspects of the desire for recognition. So far, we have focused a lot on the negative aspects of the desire for recognition, but it's important to note that it is not inherently bad. An appropriate level of desire for recognition actually has several positive functions. Source of motivation and growth. The desire to receive recognition from others can be a powerful source of motivation. It encourages us to develop skills, learn new things, and continuously improve ourselves. For example, athletes often train harder to gain the recognition and respect of fans. Students study harder to receive praise from teachers and parents. Employees are motivated to perform better through recognition from colleagues and superiors. In fact, without recognition, many people might lose motivation for achievement. Because if we feel that our achievements don't matter to anyone, the reason to strive for them diminishes. What's interesting is that appropriate praise and recognition can actually strengthen intrinsic motivation. Specific recognition focused on process and effort reinforces an individual's desire to develop their abilities, strengthening social bonds and sense of belonging. Giving and receiving recognition from others strengthens social bonds and promotes a sense of community. When we feel valuable and important to others, we experience a deeper sense of belonging. This sense of belonging is more than just a good feeling. According to research, strong social bonds are associated with better mental and physical health, longer lifespan, and overall life satisfaction. Feedback and mechanism for self-improvement. Recognition and criticism from others provide an important feedback mechanism that allows us to better understand and improve ourselves. Through the reactions of others, we gain valuable information about the effectiveness and impact of our actions. This information helps us better utilize our strengths and improve our weaknesses. Of course, not all feedback is equally useful. Constructive and honest feedback is most helpful for our growth. And what's important in determining the value of feedback is where it comes from. That is, the credibility and expertise of the source. Chapter 7. Managing a healthy desire for recognition. Now we reach an important question. Is the goal to completely eliminate the desire for recognition from others? Probably not. Instead, we can aim to develop a healthier relationship with this desire. Self-awareness and inner work. The first step in developing a healthy desire for recognition is self-awareness. We can ask ourselves questions such as, first, how often do I sacrifice my true self to gain recognition from others? Second, what emotions do I experience when I don't receive recognition? Third, how much does recognition from others affect my self-esteem? Fourth, who are the people whose recognition I crave the most? And why are their opinions so important to me? Answering these questions honestly helps us recognize patterns of desire for recognition and understand how they affect our lives. An interesting point is that this process of self-awareness can often be uncomfortable. We may discover that many aspects of our behavior were aimed at gaining recognition from others, which can sometimes challenge our self-image. But this discomfort is an essential part of growth. Developing intrinsic value and self-validation. The key to moving away from excessive dependence on external recognition is to develop a sense of intrinsic value and self-validation. Intrinsic value is believing that you are valuable simply because you exist, regardless of external achievements or recognition. This is not an easy concept, but it can be developed in several ways. First is practicing self-compassion. It's learning to treat yourself kindly even when you fail or make mistakes. Next is recognizing strengths. It's recognizing and focusing on your unique talents, characteristics, and values. And finally, self-acceptance. It's accepting all aspects of yourself that are not perfect. Self-validation is the ability to confirm and acknowledge your own worth, feelings, and thoughts. It allows you to validate your experiences without relying on the recognition of others. From a cynical perspective, modern society often hinders the development of such intrinsic value and self-validation. We are surrounded by media and advertising that encourage us to constantly compare ourselves to others. In fact, many industries are based on our insecurities and craving for external recognition. Finding inner value in this system is a kind of countercultural act. Forming healthy social relationships. Another important aspect of developing a healthy relationship with the desire for recognition from others is building healthy social relationships around us. In healthy relationships, there is an element of unconditional acceptance and support. That is, we are accepted as who we are, not because we behave in a certain way or achieve certain accomplishments. To form such relationships, first, find people who provide a safe space where you can express your true self. Second, spend time with people who recognize your worth based on who you are, not what you can do. Third, set boundaries in relationships that constantly judge or criticize you. Fourth, if no improvement is seen, boldly give up that relationship. Also, it's important that we ourselves provide the same kind of unconditional support to others. This helps form healthier and more reciprocal relationship patterns. Balanced perspective. A healthy relationship with the desire for recognition. Ultimately, the goal is not to completely eliminate the desire for recognition from others, but to develop a balanced perspective on it. A healthy approach has the following characteristics. 1. Enjoying recognition from others, but not depending on it. 2. Accepting constructive criticism as an opportunity for growth. 3. Internalizing only praise and recognition that align with your values. 4. Accepting the fact that you cannot be recognized in every situation. This is a lifelong journey, not a state that can be perfectly achieved. We will all crave external recognition from time to time. What's important is to recognize such moments, have compassion for oneself, and gradually strengthen the sense of inner worth. Chapter 8. The desire for recognition from spiritual and philosophical perspectives. The desire for recognition from others raises deep spiritual and philosophical questions beyond a simple psychological phenomenon. Let's see what insights various traditions and thinkers provide on this topic. Buddhist perspective. Attachment and suffering. In Buddhism, the desire for recognition from others is seen as a form of attachment. According to the core teachings of Buddhism, attachment is the main cause of suffering. From a Buddhist perspective, when we become attached to the opinions and judgments of others, we inevitably experience suffering, because the recognition of others is essentially beyond our control. One of the goals of Buddhist practice is to break free from such attachments and find inner peace. This is achieved by developing, through mindfulness and meditation, the realization that our worth is not dependent on external recognition. Interestingly, this teaching of Buddhism aligns with many findings of modern psychology. Both recognize that excessive dependence on external validation can lead to psychological suffering. Stoic philosophy. Indifference to what cannot be controlled. Ancient Greek and Roman Stoic philosophy provides another interesting perspective on the opinions of others. Stoic philosophers divided everything in the world into two categories. That is, what we can control and what we cannot control. They taught that we should develop indifference to what we cannot control. The thoughts and opinions of others are clearly beyond our control. Therefore, according to Stoic philosophy, we should be indifferent to them. Instead, we should focus on what we can control, that is, our own actions, thoughts, and values. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote, "Rid yourself of the worry about the opinions of others. It is a terrible tyrant for your happiness." This Stoic perspective offers great wisdom to modern people. In the age of social media, we are exposed to the opinions and judgments of others more than ever before. Stoic philosophy encourages us to break free from these pressures and develop an inner compass. Christian tradition. Recognition from God and recognition from humans. From a Christian perspective, excessive desire for recognition from others can often be seen as a form of idolatry. That is, placing the opinions of others at the center of life instead of God. In John 5:44 of the New Testament, Jesus said, "How can you believe if you accept praise from one another, yet make no effort to obtain the praise that comes from the only God?" The Christian tradition encourages seeking recognition from God rather than from humans. This means focusing on inner character and relationship with God, rather than external achievements or social status. Paul expressed this in 1 Thessalonians 2:4 as follows, "We are not trying to please people, but God, who tests our hearts." Finding the true self and the desire for recognition. A common theme across various spiritual and philosophical traditions is that breaking free from attachment to external recognition allows us to discover our true or essential self. Psychologist Carl Jung called this the process of individuation. His argument is a journey to discover the true self beyond the social mask or persona. In many traditions, this journey of self-discovery begins when we break free from the expectations and judgments of others and discover our own inner wisdom and values. Chapter 9. The Desire for Recognition and Modern Society. Modern society presents unique challenges and opportunities related to our desire for recognition from others. In this chapter, we'll explore this context more deeply. The recognition economy and the commodification of attention. In the digital age, a new economic model called the attention economy has emerged. In this model, people's attention and recognition become valuable currency. Influencers, YouTubers, and content creators make a living through recognition from others in the form of followers, subscribers, and likes. This shows how recognition can be converted into actual economic value beyond simple psychological reward. From a cynical perspective, this economic model actively commodifies and exploits one of our most basic psychological needs. Our desire for recognition has now become an engine that generates profit. What's more concerning is that this often reinforces a cycle of insecurity. Social media algorithms often encourage stimulating and controversial content, which makes users constantly compare their worth and popularity to others. The desire for recognition and workplace culture. In the modern workplace, recognition is a key motivating factor. Many organizations attempt to leverage this desire through employee recognition programs, performance evaluations, and various forms of public praise. On the positive side, a healthy culture of recognition can enhance employee engagement, job satisfaction, and productivity. When employees feel their contributions are noticed and valued, they tend to be more satisfied and work harder. On the negative side, some workplace environments can foster unhealthy competition and over-reliance on external validation. Toxic productivity and hustle culture often reinforce cultural messages that connect self-worth with achievement. Interestingly, according to research on high-performing organizations, the most effective recognition is specific, authentic, and timely. Rather than a general, well done, recognizing specific behaviors or achievements is much more impactful. Education and recognition. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Educational systems often play an important role in shaping our relationship with the desire for recognition. Traditional educational models often emphasize extrinsic motivation through grades, awards, and other forms of external recognition. This can condition students to study for external approval and achievement rather than the intrinsic value of learning. Alternative educational approaches emphasize intrinsic motivation factors such as curiosity, mastery, and autonomy. These approaches aim to help students find value and meaning in learning without external recognition. According to research, intrinsically motivated learning often leads to deeper understanding, better information retention, and greater passion for lifelong learning. Chapter 10. Conclusion. The journey beyond recognition. As we conclude our journey on the desire for recognition and praise from others, let's summarize some key insights and directions forward. Summary of key insights. As we have seen, seeking recognition from others is a universal human experience with deep biological, psychological, and social roots. The key insights are: first, the pursuit of recognition is biologically reinforced by neurotransmitters such as dopamine and oxytocin. Second, evolutionarily, we are programmed to seek recognition from others because group recognition was important for survival and reproduction. Third, our self-concept and identity are formed through the responses and recognition of others. Fourth, when the desire for recognition becomes excessive, it can lead to psychological problems such as perfectionism, social anxiety, and conditional self-esteem. Fifth, a healthy desire for recognition can be a source of motivation, growth, and social bonding. Sixth, various spiritual and philosophical traditions encourage breaking free from attachment to external recognition and discovering inner worth. Biblical perspective. The source of true worth. The Bible presents a clear perspective on the human pursuit of recognition and praise. Proverbs 29:25 says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe." This warns that the fear of human approval and praise can lead us into spiritual and emotional traps. In Galatians 1:10, the Apostle Paul asks a powerful question. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. This clearly shows that we should seek God's approval over human recognition. Jesus warned in Matthew 6:1, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." This shows that doing good deeds for the recognition and praise of others can nullify the value of those actions. John 12:43 says of the religious leaders, "They loved human praise more than praise from God." This warns of the danger of prioritizing human praise over God's approval. The teaching of the Bible is clear. Our ultimate worth comes not from external recognition or praise, but from God's unconditional love and the fact that we were created in His image. In Jeremiah 29:11, God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." The way forward, a balanced approach. The healthiest approach to the desire for recognition is not to try to eliminate it completely, but to develop a balanced relationship with it. Practical steps for this include: first, discover self-awareness. Recognize your patterns of seeking recognition and identify when it is healthy and when it is unhealthy. Second, strengthen inner sense of worth. Practice recognizing your intrinsic worth regardless of external achievements or recognition. Third, build healthy relationships. Form relationships with people who accept and support you as you are. Fourth, practice intentional reflection. Connect with your inner voice through practices such as meditation or journaling. Fifth, root in biblical truth. Take to heart the truth as stated in Psalm 139, verse 14. "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made." Concluding reflection. The desire for recognition and praise from others is a universal part of the human experience. It is deeply rooted in our biology, psychology, and social structures. However, at the same time, it brings many challenges and potential pitfalls. The healthiest approach is not to completely deny this desire or to completely succumb to it, but to develop a balanced relationship based on self-awareness and inner worth. The Bible provides profound insight into this. In Romans 12:2, Paul exhorts, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is His good, pleasing, and perfect will." Ultimately, our worth comes not from external recognition or praise, but from a deeper understanding of who we are and what we value. When we embrace this truth, we can break free from the endless pursuit of recognition from others and experience more genuine freedom and peace. This journey is neither simple nor easy. It is a lifelong process of growth and self-discovery, but it is a worthy journey. Because ultimately, it leads us to a more authentic self, more meaningful relationships, and a more fulfilling life. As Jesus taught in Matthew 10:39, "Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." True worth and satisfaction can be found not in chasing external recognition, but in committing oneself to God's will and His plan for us. Closing words. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you sincerely for exploring with us today the topic of why do humans want recognition and praise from others? It has been an honor to think together about this complex and multi-layered human desire. I hope this audiobook has brought you a deeper understanding and compassion for yourself and others. We are all walking the same journey, and there are moments when we want to confirm our worth through external recognition. Recognizing, understanding, and learning to handle that desire in a healthy way is an important part of self-growth. If you found this content helpful, please subscribe to our channel and share it with others. We provide new content on human psychology and spiritual growth every week. Your encouragement and support are a great strength to us. Ultimately, remember that your worth lies not in the recognition of others or the number of likes, but in who you are and the unique gift you bring to the world. As the psalmist says, each of us was fearfully and wonderfully made. Looking forward to meeting you in the next audiobook, and may God's abundant blessings be with all of you. Thank you.